The contract editor is a Crestron software tool that allows us to give names to the signals and supersede traditional join numbers. Humans don't like numbers that much, we are more attached to friendly names. Imagine that you have a whole frontend team who doesn't know anything about what is happening on the backend, and then you give them some numbers on which they need to send some signal or receive a response. Maybe that's not a good idea. Instead of receiving something from the join number 179, the front-end programmer can now receive, for example, a signal called projector lamp hours feedback. It makes more sense, isn't it? In this video, we will explore how to use contract editor with the Simpl Pro and React code, and for that, we will use a code that I wrote in one of the previous tutorials. All the links will be in the description of this video. On this page, you can find how to install a contract editor, so before we go further, make sure that you accomplish this step. On the desktop, we are gonna create a folder and call it Contract Editor Test. Inside that folder, we will open a command prompt by typing here cmd. Go on the browser on this GitHub repository. Click on the code, HTTPS, and click on this copy button. Back in the command prompt, type git clone and paste a link that you have copied. Go on this page and do the same for the frontend project. To finish installing a frontend app, we need to install npm dependencies in the React project. Type in the cmd cd crestron-react-app. Now type code dot and press enter. This will open a frontend project in your IDE. Open a terminal and type npm install. This will create a node modules folder and install all of the dependencies that you have in the package.json file. Now we are ready for creating a contract. You can see here what our current GUI looks like, and under that you can see how frontend and backend communicate. The frontend sends 3 digital and 1 analog signal and receives 1 analog and 1 serial signal. But if I didn't tell you anything about those pictures, would you know what that is? Probably not, and probably you still don't know what is going on here. Because of that, we will use contract editor and give a name to the events and feedback. In this chapter, we will create only contract for the digital signals, and later, we will create a contract for all 6 signals. Let's give those digital signals a name. Does this now make sense to you? Great! Now create another folder inside of the contract editor test folder and call it contract. Open a contract editor and click on create a new contract. Under the location, we will choose a folder that we recently created. The name will be contract test. Click on create. All of these fields are not currently relevant to us, so we will skip that in this tutorial. Under the build option, uncheck simple. Click on save contract. Let's go on component details. Click on this plus button to create a new component. For the sake of this example, we will look at the buttons as one big component that has 3 events. We will give the name buttons to the component. Let's add the first attribute, and that will be a boolean type with the event name redPressedButton. Do the same for the other buttons. You can notice that I only used event but not state. But let's first make a comparison with the Simpl Plus module. This picture is showing that a module has 3 digital outputs but no digital inputs or feedback. We just created the same thing here in contracteditor. We defined only events that are the signals which are going from the frontend to the backend. In a real-life application, it is preferable to add a state. Let's add those states, although we will not use them in this example. Now, the Simpl Plus module analogy looks like this. Before we go further, click on the Save button. The final step is to click on the Contract Side button and under the component name, choose a component that we just created. We will use only one instance, so the rest of the parameters are OK. Now click on the Save and then the Build Contract button. Congrats! We've built our first contract. We can take a look at what did contracteditor created. Inside the contract folder, go to the output, contract test, and here you can see 2 folders. We will need to implement the interface to our frontend project and programming to the backend. So let's first do the frontend part. Open the interface folder, mapping, and copy this file. Go back to the root of the folder and open the Crestron React app folder. Here we can create a folder and call it a contract. Inside that folder, paste a JSON file that you previously copied. Now open a frontend in your IDE and go to the package.json file. Under the build archive script, we need to include that JSON contract file. At the end of the command, type -c /contract /contract test .cse2j. Now open app.tsx file. Here we need to replace digital join numbers with the names that we gave to the buttons. Under the setRedBackground function, we will replace one with buttons.redPressedButton. Do the same for the rest of the code, but with the accurate name. Save it and now deploy it to the touchscreen. Now it's time for the backend. Go back to the contract file, output, contract test, programming, simplsharp, contract test, and copy these 4 files. Go back to the root of the folder and open the simplsharppro app folder. Here open the simplsharppro app folder. Create a folder with the contract name and paste files inside that folder. Go back twice and open the solution file. I'm using Rider, but the same is in the Visual Studio or other IDEs. Right-click on the simplsharppro app, Add existing item. Choose Contract and click on the Select folder. At the top of the control system class, we'll add using contract test because this is the name of the contract that we made. We will now add a few lines of code and rename some existing lines, so take a closer look. Remove TSW1060 and add private basic tree list with smart object. Under that, add private contract. Let's initialize that contract. Add a touch panel to the contract. Now add a few event handlers for each button. I will just paste the code so you can pause the video and make sure that you have the same code as I do. We can now get rid of this code because we will no longer use it. Change that else if with if. And that's it for now. You can see that now every digital signal has its own event handler, and we can conclude from the event name what this is for. Build the code, and now we will upload it to the processor. For the upload, we will use a PowerShell script. Inside of the PowerShell script, make sure that everything is written correctly and then run it. Let's see if it works. Yep, all works correctly. Let's now explore more things, and the first is a subcontract. If you are working with a few different teams, it is possible that every team creates its own contract. Sometimes you would like to implement someone's contract to your contract, and in that case, you're considering their contract as a subcontract. We will do the same in this example. The first contract that we created was contract test, and it contains 3 digital buttons. Now we will implement it as a subcontract and additionally add the rest of the 3 signals. Open a contract editor and click Create the new contract. We will call it Main Contract. As the last time, unchecked Simple. On the right side, you can see Subcontract List section. Click on the plus button and add Contract Test CCE file. Click on Save Contract. Click on the side button Component Details. Here you can see that Buttons component has been included in this list, and if we click on this folder button, it will open its component details. Let's add other signals by pressing the plus button. We'll call this component Response. Add a new attribute of type numeric. Under the event type, opacity value. We will now say that this event has its response, and we will call it opacity value FB. add the second attribute of type string. We will have only state here, and we will call it background text FB. And that's it. Now save it and click on the last sidebar button. Here we need to add both of the components, one from this new contract and one from the subcontract. Click on Save and Build Contract. Now it's time to import a new contract into the projects. We will start with the frontend. We need to replace the existing contract with the new one. First, let's delete the old contract. Now we need to copy the JSON file from the main contract folder to the frontend project. I explained this process earlier, so I will speed up the video a little bit because I suppose that you learned how to do that in the previous section. Inside the code, we need to change the build archive script and replace a contract test with main contract. Inside the app.tsx file, we will replace join numbers with signal names. Here we need to replace one with response opacity value FB. Under that, we will replace one with response.backgroundText FB. Finally, in line 39, we will replace this one with response.opacity value. Save the code and deploy a code to the touch panel. Back to the backend. Again, you need to replace the old contract files with the new ones. So let's do that. In the IDE, delete the existing files in the contract folder. Now copy the new contract to the backend project. I will again speed up the video. Once you've done it, go in the IDE, right-click on the project name, Add, and Add Existing Item. Add everything inside the contract folder. Now we need to change a few things in our code to make it work. First, we need to change the code in the line 8. Replace contract test with main contract. Under existing event handlers, add a new one. I will from now on just paste the code so you can pause the video and make sure that you have the same code as I do. We'll cut and paste almost the whole code from the method below. Move this whole if to the new opacity value method. We need to change the code a little bit. Remove this and replace args with e.cargs here and here. Now we'll create a new void method and call it setBackgroundText. We will move the rest of the code from this method below into this new one. Add here an else if statement, just like this. Move this code from this last else to here. We can now delete the myTouchPanel seekChange method. Now we will call the setBackgroundText in a few places. Paste it in every button's method as well as here. Go a little bit up and replace this whole if with this line of the code. The last thing is that we need to replace join numbers with the signal names from the contract. Let's do it one by one. In the opacity value method, change this line with the following. Here replace this line with this. In the setBackgroundText method, replace this line with this line. And finally, replace this line with the new one. We are now finished with adjusting the code, now let's test it. First, we need to save, build and deploy a code. Let's see if it works. As you can see, everything works as we expected. We successfully created and integrated a contract into our code. And that's it for this tutorial. See you in the next video.